Hello, my name is Ted Horneby, and I'm very happy to share my TOC story with the greater Goldratt community. I started my TOC journey the same as most people, and that was by reading The Goal. Actually, I didn't read it, but I had it explained to me by a friend who had read it in her undergraduate management class. But the ideas stuck with me. At a very early age in my career, through luck or just being at the right place at the right time, I became general manager of a small factory. Looking back, I was probably not qualified to run the operation, but you make do. I inherited a very traditional push manufacturing process, and we would have these flare-ups of late deliveries or unstable operation periods, which seemed pretty random, but serious enough to make me direct the management team to respond. And we did this by increasing our raw material inventory, but nothing seemed to give us long-term reliability and stability. After about a year of this, I remembered The Goal and finally actually read it, and it was certainly the aha moment that many people describe, and it started to let me think differently about my factory management, but I didn't really understand how it worked. As an aside, my university major was in modern Chinese history with a focus on the May 4th literary movement. So to say that I had a lot to learn about running a company is somewhat of an understatement. So about this time, I applied for business school and was accepted to the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. At Chicago Booth, our operations class read The Goal, but in addition to just reading it, Chicago got into the details of how TOC worked and gave you the formulas and laws to help explain the concepts. By this time in my career, the small factory that I had been running had exploded to about 800 people and over $50 million in revenues. We were a die casting foundry, and all the senior leadership and owners had come up on the die casting side of the business. So the governing philosophy was that the die casting machines were the money makers and that they should never be turned off, so that every minute that they were offline was money lost. After studying TOC at Chicago, I was able to understand that the constraint in the foundry were the CNC machining operations, and that the die casting was a transparent commodity. And by that I mean buyers would weigh our product and multiply the price of aluminum by the weight and tell us how much they would pay for die cast parts. The only products that we truly made money on were the CNC machine parts. So it was quite contrary to company culture when I started to limit the die casting output in order to meet the drumbeat of the CNC centers. In other words, focusing on the constraint. We realized we had overinvested in die casting machines and underinvested in CNC machines. So with what I learned at Chicago, we also took at small steps like reducing batch sizes of die cast parts we made before we moved them to the machining centers and some other small initiatives. But this was still managing around the edges. We were still a push organization that culturally was against letting our non-constraint die casting process sit idle, in fact. It wasn't until I started as a general manager at a company whose owners had gone through TOC training that I was finally able to bring it all together and really use TOC. And while the owners at my new company had been trained in TOC, they hadn't implemented it at any of their factories. But it was time when I arrived. Our customers had adopted an automotive JIT approach to managing suppliers, and on-time delivery, smaller and smaller batch sizes were being forced on us. But we were still operating in a forecast-based push system. I was fortunate to be able to convince our board to hire the Goldratt consulting group here in China and to implement a drum buffer rope system. And the results were incredible. Our inventories were cut by more than 30%. Our dock-to-stock velocity decreased by more than 50%. We freed up or created 20% more capacity from existing production equipment, requiring us to reduce our capital investment. Outside of the factory floor and operations improvements, TOC gave us an incredible visibility through the organization as to what each department is supposed to do and what each individual is supposed to do on a daily basis. And we suddenly had time for Poogie projects, and most exciting, with this increased amount of time and after being exposed to the drum buffer rope process and TOC training, our staff started undertaking Poogie on their own and through their own initiative started going out and addressing constraints in the process that management hadn't identified. We also applied our TOC to the project management process and saw really big improvements in projects that were completed and delivered on time. To say that Dr. Goldratt and TOC changed my way of running companies and looking at problems doesn't really do justice to how much TOC has helped me become a better and more effective manager. So I'm very grateful to Dr. Goldratt, Goldratt Consulting, for the personal development skills that I've been able to acquire through TOC. Thank you very much.